Hello and welcome to 20 Lore Pro. I'm SirAshtown and we're here today with JDRR getting ready for store championships. How are you doing, JDRR?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back again for I think the third time now. It seems like I'm on once a set at this point.
Yeah, you've become kind of a regular and the community loves it. We've seen kind of the popularity almost become kind of, I don't want to say cult following, but we're definitely niche in the Sapphire Amethyst and the Amethyst Steel. We're a little niche now. I think they're good. I mean, it's a lot of fun to play.
I guess people just like to cheer for the underdog.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially with our favorite Blurple. JDR, we appreciate you joining us. You're a little bit under the weather, so it means a lot that you're coming on just to help prepare the community as we enter into the store champ season. This is honestly when there are erratas or bans. It's kind of a time when the community can almost become a little frantic for looking for the new lists or what to play or advice as the meta becomes very volatile, kind of like it does in the beginning of the season. But I mean, we had like what, four huge tournaments and then a ban happened. And so now here we are trying to find out. Yeah, crazy time.
It was literally like a brand new set all over again after the Hiram ban.
It really was. And even Steel, I mean, honestly, I'm sure there's some really great reasoning as to why they banned Fortisphere. Maybe the fact that it was an ability that's not in tune with the color, but messed up that blue Steel deck and some others. So interesting time.
That was a big hit for them. Poor blue steel players out there, you know, they finally got some new toys to play with, and you know the deck was feeling really, really strong because it obviously was. I think it was the best deck in the format. And then in literally a month, there's like, nope, no new toys for you now. Hey, just like every color, there is a very strong following of loyal players that play each specific color that they love. That's kind of what I like about this game, right? Everyone has the decks and colors that they love, and they just stick with it.
I take a lot of nod from Harlan Sweetie, who has been a great Lorcana player, performed very well, but has been a long time Sapphire Steel player, kind of helped develop the term Kiwi for Sapphire Steel, and he has been dedicated to that list, and he's got lots of videos on it. So if you haven't seen Harlan Sweetie, you should check him out because he's got some fun stuff talking about Sapphire Steel. Another guru, if you don't know, in the community for Amethyst Steel and for Blurple, JDRR has been a long-time coach, a long-time just community member who has been open in giving his advice and his how-to guides on how to play both Blurple and Amethyst Steel. And we're here kind of asking, hey, JDRR, help us out as we are trying to get ready for store championships. Kind of looking at post-ban, how do you feel about the meta so far since we've lost both Harem and Fortisphere?
So I think the biggest thing obviously was losing Hiram in the meta. So decks like that relied on it, like red, blue, and blue steel, they lost their strongest and most consistent draw engine, right? And so because Hiram is no longer in the game, it allowed all the other decks to build differently because you no longer have to put cards in your deck that answers Hiram, or you don't have to play cards like Merlin Rabbit, for example, to grind with them, because the issue, for example, with a lot of purple decks was that you had to continue drawing cards, right? That this game of attrition where red, blue, all the blue decks just have so many resources because they just keep drawing cards, right? And if you didn't play Rabbit, you couldn't keep up with those resources. But then set 7 came along. And then, Sapphire got really strong. They got, the new Tamatoa, happy as a clam. And that really pushed Hiram even stronger because they were just seemingly drawing an infinite amount of cards because of how efficient the draw engine was. Just made it to a point where blue became a better draw color than purple. But at the same time, they're ramping, right? So then, long story short, it got banned. So that changed how we can approach deck building now because we no longer have to play that long game. And because of this, what happened was the control decks, we don't really have a true control deck at this moment of recording this video. There might be one that pops out later, but as of right now, there really isn't. So with the loss of control decks, there is a less need for decks to play fast and aggro. Because if you remember the last couple of sets, you're either red-blue, or you're a deck trying to get under red-blue, or you're a deck trying to grind with red-blue going into the late game.
Red-blue has definitely been the big meta shaper, and when you're building decks, you had to keep it in mind or else you would lose to it.
Exactly. So without that control deck, people aren't playing aggro anymore, or there's less need to play aggro, because if every deck is a mid-range deck, those usually will beat aggro, because usually aggro beats the control decks, control beats mid-range, but mid-range beats aggro. But if everyone's on mid-range, then aggro kind of falls off and out of favor, right? And then that's where some people see, like, we'll talk about this more in depth later, where we don't really need to run one drops in your deck anymore, because there isn't very much aggro in the meta out there.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about your list, especially because when I first saw it, it was kind of jarring. It has a lot of holes that I am used to seeing 12 of. So this is going to be great for everyone to see and to kind of hear your thought process as to why you think it's viable right now. We're getting a little hint of it right now, but I'm excited to hear more of it later on. Kind of looking at what's been going on with the meta, the huge banning that's been going on. What have been, you would say, the most popular colors or the decks to come to the forefront for people to think about when they do start deck building or testing?
So initially with the Hiram ban, almost every top player that I know were like, okay, like most likely like a Diablo deck, some sort of emerald deck, green deck was probably going to be the forefront or the front runner, in the meta, because just like its worst matchup is out of the meta. But what actually happened was that everyone started to tech for Diablo. So all the purple decks started to play Peter Pan Shadowfinder. They started to play Iago. Because like what would happen is they would play this, and then they would play Iago and give it rush. Because this gives every evasive character a rush. So the next turn they play Iago, and then Iago just swings into whatever, right? And the other thing is that all the Amethyst decks, they're playing 4 copies of Genie, 4 copies of the 5-cost Elsa, the 5th Spirit. They're already running all these natural evasive cards that are an out to Diablo, right? Then you add Peter Pan Shadowfinder on top. You add Iago on top of that. That's like 16 evasive cards just in your deck that are character forms of removal for Diablo. And it's just like what happened in, I think it was the first weekend you saw that the Emerald decks didn't do very well because of all this evasive tech. And then like you saw like red purple evasives with Maui Shark and Iago and Genie and Peter Pan Shadowfinder, this new red purple version. That's something that kind of came up in the first week as a counter to that. And then obviously the DKP red blue, he only played like 2 or 3 Hirams anyway to begin with, so his deck never really relied on Hiram. Losing Hiram didn't mean too much for the deck in my opinion, so that deck was still very good. And all these decks that play Maui Shark are very good against these Diablo decks, because these can't do very much about it, right?
Like you're saying, there's a lot of answers out there, and it didn't come to the forefront because people were preemptively knowing that would be probably the case, teched for it.
Yeah, because it was a concern. We're just like, how are we going to keep Diablo in check now that the red-blue is not in the meta, keeping it in check and losing Hiram, right? Because before, the blue decks, they would use Hiram to continue drawing cards so that they don't get discarded, right? They're able to keep up and keep their draw engine going. But now without the draw engine, you discard them fully, and then they don't have enough ink, right, to just top deck into like a Sisu or Be Prepared and just blow everything up, right? So that was the concern the day of the Hiram ban, that how we're going to keep Diablo in check in general.
It's definitely been an exciting time for Lorcana because we had some major tournaments, we had the ban, we have a couple of tournaments, especially in Europe, that are coming up. We have, I want to say, another Southside Games tournament coming up soon. I saw Forbidden Mountain even post about a tournament that they are going to be a part of. That was a 2.5K that's going to happen soon. So there's a couple of major tournaments happening, but Store Champs is, a week or 2 away. So depending on when this video releases. So people don't have the time like they did before to look at the major players in tournaments to see the meta develop, because even going into Store Championships, there's going to be meta changes because it's changing so fast.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Like the biggest surprise to me though was Iago. I don't think anyone really had it on their radar that this was going to be the meta-defining card of set 7, this vanilla evasive bird.
So with Iago, I really like him. Like you've been saying, 4 draw, 4/6. If you're playing Sapphire like you are, you can ramp into him a turn ahead if you want to. But Iago 4/6, what kind of makes him, as you've said, the meta-defining card so far?
So, you know how earlier I was talking about how you no longer really need to play Rabbit in Amethyst decks as the draw engine because you don't need to grind that long anymore. So now you're able to play like Genie and things like that as your draw engine. So it's like a more proactive draw card that can quest for 2, right? As opposed to Rabbit, which is really slow. Iago itself is just, if you play Genie and then if your opponent plays Genie, then you play Iago, it's like, what are they supposed to do, right? This is like, you remember in set 6, the Genie Wars, everyone was playing Genie to fight Genie.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Because it was just an evasive that was so hard to remove, right?
It was terrible.
Now it's just Iago, right? Now it's Iago Wars that like who can remove it because you want to play evasives and Genie and stuff like that? Great, I'll play Iago. And red decks, they can't remove this. It's impossible without B prep.
He's got such a big
what are they
body.
supposed to do? Yeah, it's 4/6. The only thing is like against steel decks, they can, you know, remove it obviously with a spell, but then it's just like you just ink it. And then you just play Genie into steel instead.
Yeah, this card seems really great. And I'm excited to see it kind of as you talk about into the list and kind of how it has been changing the way that people are playing Amethyst lists. As we enter into store championships, you may have already mentioned this, but what decks do you think, as the meta has been shifting so quickly, are going to come to the forefront for store champs?
I think anything steel is usually the safest bet for our store champs, just because at store champs, right, you might have kids who are very casual or even adults who are very casual, or you might have like people in the middle and you might have people who are more advanced, but it's like a very wide field, right, in general, store champs. So usually steel, I think, is a very safe color for store champs just because you're not going to get, you know, steamrolled by a 10-year-old just playing aggro turning sideways, right? Because you have all the steel removal. But at the same time, steel has all the answers to everything. You can answer the Iagos with steel, like Let the Storm Rage On. You have Strength of a Raging Fire. You have Elonkim Zeus. You have answers to Maui Shark with Zeus. So it's just like the deck is very flexible and you're able to answer a lot of things in the meta right now. And I think that most likely if the player is very good, or actually if they're able to play the deck, I think Amber Steel would probably be like one of the strongest decks, if not the strongest deck to play right now, because their worst matchup used to be red blue, but I don't think the matchup is as lopsided as it used to be anymore.
I like Amber Steel. It's kind of taken some changes from set 6 into set 7. We had the DD hole, we had the Steel Song, we've had aggro versions, and I think you're right. I think all those versions are able to come about because they have some of the best removal in the game, but you can play it several different ways and it can surprise people on how strong it is.
Exactly. It's just like flexible decks that are able to change the game plan on the fly. Even Amethyst Steel to a degree, you're able to change the game plan on the fly, and you're able to you don't have an auto loss basically. Let's just put it that way. So you can really rely on yourself and skill expression to outplay your opponents, especially in store champs. Like you could run into like a difficult matchup, but if you're not against like the top of the top tier level players, you're able to turn it around even against a bad matchup.
Well, we appreciate you telling us kind of what you think's maybe at the forefront of store champs, because that is what people need to be aware of as they are brewing, as they are testing. But JDRR, you have brought, I think, a pretty viable list for store champs, one that I have already been tinkering myself in Blurple. You know that I'm a longtime Blurple player, but as we're looking at store champs, and here we are in the new store champs season, let's take a look at your Blurple list and why you think it has some viability into this meta.
So when I built this list, we're expecting that the meta was mostly red or green, so emerald or ruby, right? And that's why the deck is kind of built this way towards that. because in these colors, steel is not steel is okay. It's an okay matchup. It's not something that we can tech too much for because its colors don't have too much going for it. But going against ruby or emerald, like this is ideally what these two colors are able to beat more consistently, specifically ruby. So the first thing, like we talked about here, is the Iago meta, right? So if all the Amethyst and purple decks are playing Iago, Blurple can play our own Iago because we will always play it on turn 3 while everyone else plays it on turn 4. And then just like set 6, Genie Wars, we always win the evasive battle because we always get to play ours first, whether we're on the play or on the draw, just because we can ramp. So automatically, we already have that edge right there against all the Amethyst decks just playing Iago. Because we get to play first, like I said, and then we follow it with Elsa or Belle or whatever. And then you can just really lean on Iago against those decks. And it's just a wall, because if you quest anything into Iago, there is Belle, the 5-cost one, Accomplished Mystic, that can follow up, or Elsa, but mostly Belle, that could really punish your opponent and they could just lose the game. So for example, let's just say red purple is playing the 3-cost Sisu, the inkable one, right? So if they quest this Sisu, you can just hit it with Iago. Iago is going to survive because, you know, you're probably going to take like 4 damage from it. And then you use Belle, move 3 damage off and hit something else. Like you hit like a rabbit, you hit a goat, you hit something on their board, and that could just like devastate them, right? So number 1, that's Iago. Like we win the evasive war. The next thing that we have is Maui Half Shark. That is obviously a card that all the red decks are playing. And the best answer to this card is Hades. Zeus is also a very good answer. Like all the steel decks are playing like Zeus for it. But Hades is an even better answer. Not because it's a body. It's not a song. So you just drop Hades. You just remove it from the board. And then Hades quest for 2 is very hard to remove. A lot of red decks are not playing very many counts of Medusa right now, Meta Medusa. After you play Hades, like they have nothing that can really remove Hades from the board except for Be Prepared. That also just makes these decks a lot better. This deck a lot better. And kind of like I talked about earlier as well, the deck is like the meta is a lot more mid-range. So there is not very much aggro in the meta right now. So that's why you see no 1-drops in a purple deck. And yeah, like you said, it's very jarring when you first look at it because it looks more like a blue deck than a purple deck at this point, right? And so yeah, that's why, because there's very few aggro decks out there. The 1-drops aren't very good right now either, because if everyone is playing Diablo, for example, the Emerald one, your 1-drops just kind of get stuck there. They either get hit by Let Storm Rage on, or if you pick it up to draw a card, you are going to let Diablo draw an extra card. So it's just kind of like, it just kind of sucks to play it. Or against Amber Steel, if they open Cinderella turn 1, they're just going to sing Let the Storm Rage on your 1-drop and it just dies. So it's like, there's no point playing a 1-drop at that point. And against the red decks, with Maui Shark, if Maui Shark's on the board, you can't quest your 1-drops into Maui Shark. So why are we even playing it, right? So that's why there is no 1-drops in the deck, and we've replaced it with the Popsicle Bell package, because we are able to high roll your opponent. Because if we go Popsicle turn 1, play Bell, and then turn 2, sing Friends on the other side, it's like almost an auto win. It feels like just someone shifting a Diablo on you on turn 2. It's really strong. It's like a 3/3 on turn 1. Nothing can really kill it at all at that time. Right, and then just the card advantage that you get from that play is just crazy. The tempo that you can get. This being a new card to the deck has actually really helped that strategy, because one of the things about Blurple is that it's a tempo deck, right? And if you lose tempo, you kind of lose the game. You can just play this Bell for free sometimes. So that's why you can see in the list, there's also Finders Keepers here. Because we're not playing a Rabbit, we're not playing Snake, we've cut that package from the deck. We need another way to draw cards, kind of like I was saying, because even though Hiram is out of the meta, you still need to draw cards to keep up with the other purple decks. So you can play Finders Keepers now, because it's inkable for 1, so if it's the wrong matchup, you can just get rid of it. Unlike Rabbit, you couldn't get rid of it even if it's the wrong matchup, and sometimes you just had to play it, right? So you can ink Finders Keepers and whatever. Sometimes you can play Finders Keepers and then you can play a Bell for free. And then that feels even better because you drew 3 cards for 5 ink and you played a 3/3 to the board. I don't want to say we can build greedier, but we can definitely be a little bit greedier with our list and play like more top end, more cards with higher ceiling in it, like Finders Keepers. And you're just able to just kind of win from there just because we're playing stronger cards. Because a lot of times before, when you play like 10, 11, 12 1-drops, you would just, if you're top decking or drawing cards, you're just drawing into a 1-drop into the mid and late game. And it's just like, these cards do absolutely nothing for us. That's why we're just like, we might as well cut them if the 1-drops aren't doing anything and just play better cards.
Now, 2 other cards that in your list I'm pretty interested in as to kind of the meta choice as to why to play them. But you have 4 McDuck Manor, which is a huge location. It does gain you 2. How have you seen that perform so far?
Oh yeah, so I put this in because all the red decks were also on Be Prepared. And so McDuck Manor is like one of the biggest punishes to Be Prepared if your opponent isn't expecting it. You can force to Be Prepared, and then you just play like 2 McDuck Manors, and then what are they supposed to do, right? They can't really do anything, and then you start gaining lore from it. And that's like one of the best ways to punish a red player for using Be Prepared without a reasonable follow-up. That's why I had it in the deck, just because we're, like I said before, we're really good into red. We might as well maximize the that matchup, like the percentage, so that we're able to 2-0 or just beat red a lot easier, because this is the deck that we're supposed to be beating. So you might as well maximize your odds at beating the red decks.
Yeah, I guess between both red decks, you're right. I have seen a lot more Be Prepared, so it does make sense. Even in the red-blue lists, they've been playing, some of them playing many of the big Sisu because they're playing more Be Preps.
And that's why you see Gaston in the list. Probably the other card you wanted to talk about.
Yes, right? It is.
Yes. So when we're testing, we're just like, so you know how usually when we play Blurple at 6 ink, we're playing Rabbit Snake, right? In the old days, in the past, with 6 ink, we Rabbit Snake, draw cards, right? That's very typical play. But when I was building this new list, I was like, well, we don't have Rabbit Snake anymore. If we don't have it, we got to replace it with something. There's nothing to do with 6 ink. So I was looking through all the options. I landed on Gaston and the Happy Tamatoa. Like, those are 2 options that, depending on player preference, both of them work in this slot. Now in the meta, with the red decks not playing Sapphire Coil or Ice Block, or very much Sisu to begin with, there's nothing that really gets rid of 4 strength characters anymore. So I was like, all right, well, Gaston right now just seems like a very big rabbit snake at this point because it's a 4/4. It guarantees that I'm always going to quest for 3, and I'm able to dig into my deck, look at the top 3 cards, and find the card that I need for the next turn. So I was like, against red decks, this card is so good because it's just a huge chunk of lore. You can't ignore this, right? And then because this is such a big lore threat, they do have to remove it. I'm able to find Hades a lot easier if I don't have it in my hand already with Gaston, just because I'm looking 3 deeper. And then this, because there's more lore pressure on the board, there's an Iago on the board that they can't remove. There's Gaston right there. They have to be prepared eventually. And then that's where I'm just like, you force to be prepared because you have all these big threats, and then you drop McDuck Manor. Like, that was the initial strategy and game plan against red, and that's why those cards were in there.
With the meta kind of shifting a little bit into Amber Steel, you think for Store Championships, but maybe even some other lists, what are some of the flex cards, I guess, in this list that you think? It sounds like McDuck Manor might be one of them if red becomes less favorable, but what are some cards you could say are flex, either to decrease the number or even just to replace for a substitute altogether?
I think the Gaston, McDuck Manor, Popsicle Bell package, and the Purple Bell all are flex cards that you can use based on your local meta. So if your meta is like more Amber Steel, more aggro heavy, aggro leaning, I would cut the Popsicle Bell package and play 1-drops and just play traditionally, like your Chernobog followers, your Magic Broom, your Diablo, things like that. Just because you need to be playing a 1-drop into those aggro decks, because you can't just skip all the time. You're not going to open Popsicle Bell all the time, right? because this list specifically is teched for the top of the meta. So for example, it's like, you remember Ed's list from NACC?
I do. The list was very good.
Right. That list was very heavily teched for the top meta of the field, right? Like I'm pretty sure he said it himself, you do not play this at locals because you're probably going to get cooked by an aggro deck. Like that deck was specifically teched to beat red blue, which was the expected best deck going into the field, right? And so this deck, as the list as is also teched specifically to be against the top meta of the field, right? Popsicle Bell can go for 1-drops. Gaston, if you're against more aggro or Amber Steel, you probably want a bit more flexibility. So maybe Gaston becomes like Happy Toa instead, just because it's inkable. Also, the 5 health is relevant into Steel with Happy Toa because you can attack into Lawrence or any kind of 4/4 and not die, whereas Gaston does not live; it gets banished. So that is kind of a big interaction too. And you really just don't want to be drawing a 6-cost uninkable 4/4 that doesn't really impact the board against Steel decks. Like you need to be fighting all the time, right? So that can go. McDuck Manor, if there's no red decks, that can also be swapped out for more 1-drops, right? Because you don't need this against decks that aren't red. Even against red decks, you don't really need this. This is more of like an insurance thing that I put in, not out of necessity. So you can definitely get away with cutting this and still being able to beat red decks, but that would be flexible as well. Moving on to Bell, the purple one. I don't agree that you cut this completely, because with Iago in the deck, with Genie in the deck, you're still able to move, and Elsa, the 5th spirit, you're able to move damage very easily and get tempo back and start stabilizing the board with the Bell. But I would definitely add Merlin Crab back into the deck if there's a lot of Amber Steel and aggro, just because it allows your 1-cost characters to fight better with Merlin Crab. That's why you also see right now there's no Merlin Crab in the deck. I forgot to talk about it. But if there's no 1-drops to trade with, what are we really trading up with? Right? Because right now our characters are just bigger than our opponents. So why do we need to fight them with Merlin Crab? Right? When you're running, like apart from Tipo. Otherwise, like before, you would trade your Diablos, your Turnabogs, your Magic Brooms, and you would trade it into Daisies and those kind of characters, right? But without those characters in the deck, like I said, you don't really need this because there's nothing to trade. That's why you have Bell instead to move damage off your bigger characters, which I find is a little bit more efficient right now for this specific list. And then last thing, if I forgot to mention, if you expect a lot of mirrors, like Blurple mirrors or Amethyst Steel or something like that, the 5-cost Cogsworth would be a really good addition instead of Gaston or the location, just because in the mirror against Amethyst Steel or other Amethyst decks, it's just like that extra 1 resist just makes it so hard for Fox or Crab to hit anything. The math just doesn't add up, right? Like Hades becomes a 3/7 instead of a 3/6, and it's very hard, as you know, to hit 7 damage. Your Foxes can trade everything, right? Your 3/3s can trade their 3/3s, but then it doesn't get banished because you have resist +1. So that's another option. Right, and that's a good thing about this deck. It's very flexible. You just adjust ratios, you adjust cards based on the meta that you expect.
It's one of my favorite parts of playing Blurple is that it is very flexible based on your playstyle or your local meta. So you can always shift numbers or replace cards altogether, and it never feels too bad because you're still pretty much at the core of the list if you're playing certain cards. I see the point in Bell and Popsicle because you get to draw off of Popsicle into Bell and the next turn sing Friends, or you have this 3/3 threat early on, so it's able to challenge it on the board. So your opponent, if they are playing aggro, you still kind of have some interaction, some fight in the game. But what are your odds that you've seen in your matchups of hitting Popsicle Bell? Is it something that you look for based on the matchup, or is it something that if you get one piece, you then, well, if I get the other piece in this mulligan, that's great? How often does that happen to you?
I think the math shows that the odds of opening Popsicle Bell in a 7-card mulligan or altar is 43%. And then for those 2 plus Friends on the other side, I believe it's 27%, something like that, around that range. So Almost half the time you open Popsicle Bell, and about 1/3 of your games you have your auto win line with Popsicle Bell friends. Like, it's fairly consistent overall. And the thing is, like, you don't need to rely on it to win, right? The good thing is that they're inkable, so it's just like, if you don't see them together, just ink it. You don't really lose much, right?
I like that mindset a lot. It's like, if I get it, awesome. Like, I have this really great line. If I don't get it, well, ink the bell, no big deal. Or play Popsicle, draw a card. Like, that's fine too.
Yeah, play Popsicle. You always play Popsicle. There's nothing wrong with that. The bell, you can just ink it. If you don't have Popsicle, it's not a big deal. I will say, though, that if people want to play Tamatoa instead of Gaston, that changes how you mulligan and how you ink, obviously. Because if you play this Tamatoa, there's only 4 items, 4 popsicles, so you can't really ink those popsicles, right? Because Tamatoa relies on popsicles to keep the draw engine going, right? So then that kind of changes the flexibility of the deck in a different way. So people are like, well, you're running, like, you know, a lot of high cost uninkable cards and 4 Gastons and 4 Hades. But then if you're running Tamatoa instead, yes, you might have 8 unинkables on paper with Hades and Genie. But with Tamatoa, Popsicle is technically an uninkable as well, because you cannot ink it if you play this card, right? So it's really the same.
That was one of the questions I had for you, because I've seen some variations of the list and that you've been developing, and Tamatoa was in one of the versions. And my first thought was, man, those popsicles become like permanent real estate. Like, you have to have them. Like, or you don't have to have them, but it becomes less good without them.
Oh, for sure. I think that's why ultimately it landed on Gaston, because Gaston is, I think, the better card on exactly 6 ink, because you're guaranteed the card draw. And then it applies more lore pressure with the 3. Tamatoa, if there's no popsicle on this card, it is like the worst card in the deck. It doesn't do anything if there's no popsicle, right? Whereas after turn 6, when we're going to, you know, like 8, 9, 10 ink, that's when Tamatoa gets better than Gaston, because you probably have popsicles by then. The draw engine starts going crazy. So then that's where Gaston, I think, is not as good as Tamatoa when a game gets that much later. But the thing is, like, we don't really want to get that late in the game anyway, because we're still not a red deck that can just B prep and Sisu everything off the board, right? We do have to end the game a little bit faster. So I don't really want to play that late game plan, but Tamatoa definitely gives you another really good draw engine in the deck. If, say, like, you really needed, there's like a lot of red purple decks or something like that, and you really need to grind, then maybe that's when I would consider switching Tamatoa for Gaston, because you just need more draw to keep up with them, right? So it's flexible, right? Like, both cards are really, really good, and it just kind of comes down to your preference and your meta.
I will say I really enjoy a shift, because it is vastly different lists from what we've seen Blurple do in the past to what this is currently doing now. And I didn't know this going into this interview, so it's great to learn it now that this is in reflection of the top meta decks. And if your local meta is different, it's always okay to, but it's something to keep in mind to shift back to the older looking version of what a traditional Blurple list has been like for the last couple of sets.
Yeah, mainly with the 1-drops, right? Yeah, because like I was saying, like, if you are facing a lot of aggro, you do definitely want those 1-drops in the deck, because it just makes fighting in or playing into aggro a lot easier than what it is now. I'm not saying it's definitely harder. I'm not gonna, sit here and lie to you guys. It's definitely way harder with this version without any 1-drops to play into aggro decks. And that's the other thing. It's like, a lot of people will see, like, a deck from a top player online, right? And they just like net deck and copy it. Nothing wrong with net decking and copy it, but I think what's important for people to know is that you also need to understand why that player chose those cards and why they played those specific cards and built the deck in this way. Like I said, with Ed's list, like, that was teched heavily for Red Blue because he wanted to win Continentals, and Red Blue was 32% of the field. So he really wanted to, beat that deck. Whereas in your locals, you might not even have Red Blue in your locals, right? Then why are you playing a deck that's teched out to beat red if there's no red?
That makes a lot of sense, because there are some shops I go to and I know, okay, there are competitive players there, they're playing the meta. And then I can go to some other ones, like my LGS, for instance. It's more social. So players are playing more decks for themes, more for fun. A lot of players can't get a hold of all of the copies of cards due to that price gap. And so you know that someone's not going to play 4 versions of the Tamatoa. But that means that they can afford more aggro lists, or they can afford different variations of lists. So you might come into a mosh posh of things. So I build way differently when I play my local store versus when I go to the meta tournaments.
Exactly, right? So this, for everyone, just keep that in mind when you're looking at a list. Like, yeah, if looking at it right now, if your entire meta is like hyper aggro, then yeah, like it's obviously not going to be very good against it. So you do need to make adjustments to the list based on your meta as well, and not just take the deck as is.
Well, JDRR, we really appreciate you going over both the lists and the variations that you would make in the list for store championships as it's coming up. It's a really exciting time for Lorcana, and I'm excited to play in my own store championships. I really want to get the new playmat. It looks amazing. So I wish you and your community at the Flower Farm good luck, and hopefully you at home. This is a great deck to try out, to test, to see how you play it into your local meta and into the top decks. Keep it in mind as you are looking to test and to play against. JDRR, you have been a huge help to the community in coaching and with your deck tech guides that you write up. Do you have a guide written up yet for this list?
At the time of recording right now, no, but by the time this video is posted, I'm pretty sure I'll have something out on my Metafy that goes into more detail as well about the list and card choices and tech choices. So yeah, if the people want to check that out, it's free on my Metafy.
And if you haven't checked out JDRR's guides, if you haven't heard of Flower Farm, highly recommend it. JDRR has been a longtime community member of 20 Lore Pro. He talks a lot in the Discord, in the deck discussions channels about Amethyst Steel and Blurple. He's always in there giving advice, answering questions. So if you have questions on the deck, you can head there. But also too, he gives coaching and Metafy guides over on his Metafy and on his Discord Flower Farm. So if you'd like to learn more about how to get coaching from JDRR on how to pilot these types of lists into your meta, or to learn more about how to play the deck, we'll have those links in the description below. And again, JDRR, thank you so much for joining us. Any last words for the 20 Lore Pro community?
Well, first of all, appreciate you and thank you for having me on again for the 3rd time. And last words is just like, thank you for everyone's support. Like, there has been an overwhelming amount of support for me, for what I'm doing for the community, for the guides. Like, I'm getting a lot of comments all the time, DMs from people just thanking me. You know, the guide really helped them with winning store champs, really helped them, you know, improve their gameplay, things of that nature. So like, really big shout out to the 20 Lore community and the people out there supporting me, because without the support, you know, we can't make this happen either, right? Also, shout out to SLTC, so my friends out there as well. Really thankful to SLTC and Flower Farm for helping me test the deck and refine the deck further, because we wouldn't be able to get this data and to be able to refine it further without all of their help.
Yeah, if you have not becoming a member of the Flower Farm, either by receiving coaching from JDRR or joining his Metafy, they are, I mean, the deck was changing. Like, it felt like almost a couple of hours at a time. I mean, there was like new Liskin popped up and people were going crazy about it. I mean, it was, to sum it up, there was a one person who commented like, I went to bed at 2 a.m. and when I woke up at 8, the deck was completely different. And that's what it felt like watching this develop.
Oh, definitely. Like, people joke, and especially the people in Europe, they're like, all right, well, JDR posted a list in Discord. I'm going to bed. I'm going to wake up and it's not going to be the same list anymore.
I think it's come out to something that's really great, as you've mentioned, for the meta right now, at the top tables. And I hope that we see it more and we see people really do well at store champs with it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm not sure if it's posted on Inkdex as of today, but yesterday, Ed and his team, I believe 2 or 3 of them made top 8 at their tournament on Sunday. with this Blurple shell, but they teched it a little bit more for their meta as well and the cards that they liked. Hey, by the time that this is posted, maybe there's going to be a lot more tops with the list already, because a lot of the community of top players, the continental level players, qualified players, they all do think that this deck is very, very strong right now, and there is a lot of potential for the deck.
Well, I'm excited to see what happens, and hopefully we'll kind of have a end of the store champs, maybe look back and see how everyone did. That'd be exciting. Well, JDRR, again, thank you so much for joining us here today, and you, the community with 20 Lore Pro, thank y'all for watching. We will be back with another deck tech in the future, and then we also have planned with DKP to kind of get a look at his tournament wrap up from the April 26th Ravensburger sponsored event in Ravensburg, Germany. So be looking out for those videos in the future. JDRR, I'm sure we'll have you again in the future, either with maybe a set review or with a deck tech into set 8. But again, thank y'all for joining us here today. We'll see y'all in the next video.